Would like to start with the first question to all panelists. What role can inclusive and resilient education play in strengthening social cohesion, global citizenship, and intercultural understanding in an increasingly fragmented world?
All right, good morning, everyone, and it's so great to be here with my fellow panelists and to everybody here in the audience.
It's great to have you.
The question is very good. It's a good one. I mean, we're asking about inclusion and resilience. And I think in our context in Jamaica, we believe that inclusive education is really kind of the cornerstone of social cohesion. And usually when we talk about inclusion, a lot of times we're looking at the rural-urban dichotomy or in terms of socioeconomic dichotomies. But I also look at it in terms of even our children with special needs and how we incorporate them. So when I talk about inclusion, that's very important, and it's been a big part of policy positioning. And so I believe if we're talking about social cohesion internally in a country or externally, you have to start with the local. And so we have to teach our children that everybody has a place. And actually education policy in terms of how we deliver it can do that. And so for us, we've been focused a lot on how we integrate children, for example, with special needs into our education system, ensuring that they have the tools that they can use to survive. On the rural-urban side, we also spend a lot of time in getting technology, especially in rural areas. There are areas that are so remote that I get to go to, and it takes hours to get there on really bad roads. But when you go there, they have technology in the classrooms. And that's what you want to see. You want every child everywhere to feel that they have a part of the future. And another thing we're doing is really in terms of AI. We are almost ready to launch a learning assistant that cuts down on the inequality you see in your country, because everybody is going to have their own AI assistant to help them with education. So it's important, and I think government policy, starting at the local, moving to the global, can actually help to facilitate social cohesion.
Laura?
Well, I think that if I can distill lessons from our work in 90 countries where we are really trying to push for more inclusive education policy, I would say that there are two ingredients that are fundamental. The first one is really deliberate political action, in a sense that an inclusive education system is not the results of, doesn't come by accident. And this political action needs to be grounded into evidence, because a lot of the biases, for example, are very often hidden. They are hidden in the communities. They are part of the cultural tradition, et cetera, et cetera. This is why we start the conversation always with kind of an analytical diagnostic of where is the discrimination happening? Why is it happening? How is the community somehow pushing this type of traditional practices, and how can this be dismantled? And that, applies, I would say, to every kind of groups that is discriminated, starting unfortunately for girls. That is still, a big problem in many society. To, as the minister was saying, children with special needs that are often at best just kept in a separate structure, and that is really something that is not conducive to their integration in society. To other type of biases in countries that are more multicultural, multi-ethnic, etc., where the discrimination runs around, ethnic or religious or all cultural bias. So I think that everything starts from analysis, and then you ground really a very deliberate political action on that.
Thank you. Your Excellency?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I want to congratulate the organizers for this successful convening.
Congratulations, yes.
Education without borders has been an aspiration, a distant aspiration for Africa. But now we are happy to witness that the conversation is global.
Yeah.
And this is quite interesting for us, because when you look at the best practices all over the world, you can understand that successful educational systems are those ones who have put forward universal access to quality basic education. Number two, there are those ones who have deliberately designed inclusion by policy and practice. And number three, there are those ones who are adaptive to any kind of change that can happen at any time for any reason, and they are resilient. So from an African perspective, I think the education sector is lucky today because we have celebrated last year as a year of education. A discussion happened. A number of strategies have been renewed. Actually, the whole 4 strategies that we are using in education are new. And then a decade of education and skills was declared. So what we want to do is to make sure that as we have the discussion on implementation of those strategies, inclusion and resilience comes as the forefront of this particular fight. And when we mean inclusion, as they said, it comes with all the kind of discrimination that can happen in the education sector. It can be gender, it can be geographic, it can be disability, it can be displacement. We have a lot of refugees on the African continent. We want all of those to be part of this, and the only way to make it happen easily and quickly is to invest in digital education.
Yeah. Given that this panel is taking place in the UAE, where National Vision places humans and people at the center of everything and at the center of the future, how do we ensure developing a digital future where it's still human-centered? I mean, as a journalist, I have to ask this question too. Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. In Jamaica, we believe very strongly in a human-centered approach to digital transformation. And that means that we have to teach our children that technology is not an end in and of itself. There's much more behind it. In Jamaica, we developed an AI policy. We're the first in our region to do that, AI policy in education. Because we wanted our children not to be forced not to use it, but to encourage its use, because you want them to be conversant with it. But at the same time, one of the things we keep saying is that you have to not just see yourself as a consumer of the technology, but also a producer of it. Because for very small states like mine, we are always consuming technology. And it's important that in introducing, for example, artificial intelligence, that you make it second nature for our children from as early as possible, but also teaching them that it's about problem solving. Because at the end of the day, you want to use the AI tools to solve problems. And so we've started from early with the hackathons, and we're having the robotics clubs and so on, because we believe that they need to be taught how to solve problems and to see technology as an important part of solving problems in this world and in our own country. And so that's why we spent a lot of money in getting technology into our schools, because we believe that in getting technology in our schools, it means that our children will understand its use. And that's really very important for us. We also have tacked onto it civics in our schools, because it's very important that we're introducing all this technology, but you also have to teach that value stack that you want for your country, and that will be able to propel you forward. And so we've married the digital transformation and those tools with also a heavy emphasis on the values that we want to instill. And so that's how we are trying to bridge that gap and making sure that technology is seen as something that is more human-centric and something that can be used for good.
Laura?
Well, I think that, to me, the greatest risk is that technology is seen as a kind of a blanket solution that applies the same way in very different contexts. And I think that if I think about a classroom in Chad or a classroom here and a classroom in the United States, these are 3 very different realities. And so the technological solutions that are identified for each one of these contexts need to be coherent and consistent with what is the culture of the place, with the tradition and the familiarity that children have with using technology. They need, in some contexts, to be introduced gradually, etc. So I think that one of the things that, for example, we at the GPE have tried to do is really to try to bridge the gap between this enormous potential that the tech company have and then the real understanding of what is the reality on the ground in the countries in which we operate. Because if you do not bridge that, then I feel that, you know, the vision that they may have from Palo Alto doesn't necessarily apply to the classroom that I am familiar with in Chad. And so how do you make sure that everything is adapted and adjusted to a reality that is culturally, sociologically very different in different contexts, and that also is supported by very different, for example, platform. And so the use of that is also going to be very different. And that, to me, is still remains a challenge. And I feel that is what is going probably to determine whether or not technology is really going to be the great solution to the current problem of the education sector, and therefore the great equalizer, or if it's going to bring even more inequality to the system, and that I think it's really a risk.
Yeah, that's a question everybody is asking. Your Excellency?
Thank you very much. I want first to appreciate this country as a leader of human-centered innovation. From African Union perspective, we believe that indeed digital education is to go along with humanity. And the most important thing is, ethics and critical thinking. But the challenge that we are having is how do we localize the content? And how do we have it in our several hundreds of languages? That is where I think I go with the idea of taking it from the big tech to the reality on the ground. Because yes, we all need that technology, but we need it in our own context. Following our own culture, our own ethics. This is very, very critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Dana, how do you balance the long-term development and implementation of digital education strategies with the ongoing needs for adaptability and continuing planning in regions that constantly face risks, like hurricanes, for example? Yes.
All right, that is a very good question. And right now, we are recovering from a hurricane, a very devastating hurricane. A Category 5 hurricane that's probably a Category 6. We've never seen a hurricane that strong in history. And so what happened, I spoke to you about our schools and putting technology even in rural areas. But the areas that were damaged, mainly in the western part of Jamaica, all of them had new labs. And then the hurricane comes and destroys those schools, and there goes all of that technology and all of that infrastructure that we had spent on. Now, for countries, and especially our small island developing states, climate change is real for us, and we are feeling the impact of it. The year before, we had Hurricane Beryl, which was one of the fastest developing hurricanes in history. And then last year, we have Hurricane Melissa, which is the strongest that has been recorded. And so we've had to figure out how you be resilient in a context like that. And COVID-19 helped us because we had to learn how to work in crisis. And so we used a lot of that. But with COVID, the solution was actually to go remote and to use digital. But when you have a hurricane, a lot of the digital options are cut off. And so we now have to be looking sort of also at the digital but the analog elements in the event of a crisis. And so now we're happy because 90 days after a historic hurricane like that, every school in that area is open. But it's not perfect. We have tents. UNICEF has helped us with tents, and we have rotational school. But in our country, we're going to have to look very differently at what resilience is. And we've been starting that work, and we're very happy to see that it's been proving successful. But every country, every small country has to look at its emergency education and emergency frameworks and make it as robust as possible, because crises are going to come.
I agree on that. Laura, as the world's largest fund for education for development, how does GPE ensure digital education investments reach the right institutions?
Well, that's, as I said, it's a challenge. And I think that, governments are really at the moment struggling a battle on two tracks.
Yeah.
In a sense that on one hand, there is really the need to resolve some of the traditional historic problems of poor performance of the education sector and low literacy or lack of access, etc. On the other, we have a labor market that is changing at the speed of light, and that really requires the education sector to produce different type of skills. Digital is fundamental to, help on both of these things, but it really needs to be presented in a way that allows the, that is fostered by what is the culture of the country, of the system in which it operates. And that, to me, is what allows also more equity in the system, because the education sector, we shouldn't forget, is not just what happens in the school, is the whole infrastructure that supports it.
Correct.
And so the role of families, the role of communities is super important. And this is why we are working with a broader range of actors to make sure that everybody is involved and that resources then goes to actually everybody in an equitable way.
Yeah, Your Excellency, part of preparing the future generation is to build the right skill set. How is the African Union preparing future generations with the skills to add value to strategic minerals in Africa, like cobalt, for example, that is very necessary in the production of AI?
Thank you very much. I think there you have touched the critical failure in our whole mining system, because it may not be only cobalt, because it's one of the hundreds and hundreds of minerals where Africa is producing. But the problem is, like for the cobalt that you just mentioned, we understand that 70% is produced in Africa, but it is sold as raw material. Africa getting only 2% of the share of the whole value of the cobalt. So that's skills and industrial gaps. And was it in 2024, I think, the African Union adopted a green mining strategy.
Yeah.
And that green mining strategy is supporting an African development center on mining that is based in Guinea. And now the whole move is to focus on aligning the skills both from the technical and vocational training and universities to make sure that they produce the necessary skills for the industry to be more interested in coming and doing the work on the ground in Africa, so that we can bring back all that investment and create jobs on the African continent. We do have a number of successful examples of training highly skilled people. That is a project of the World Bank, African Higher Education Centers of Excellence, with 2 specific centers. Actually, it's 3, but I'm going to mention 2 of them. One of them focusing on mining at Cobalt University in Zambia, and another one focusing on oil and gas in Mondrane University in Mozambique.
Wow.
So this is actually what we are advocating for. Let this initiative be supported. Let us have kind of training hubs all over the continent, and with the current continental free trade area, let us have those skills able to move from a country to another to fill the gaps where it happened, so that we try to avoid as much as we can to be raw material providers. That's what I can say, but I can elaborate. I was looking at time.
Yes.
It's longer on
We're
our
almost out of
side,
time,
so
yeah.
I'm just stopping there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Laura, Honorable Dana. Thank you very much for this insightful session.
Thank you.
Thank you.